Reid Stephan, how are you?
I'm doing good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, sir. You are the chairman of the Idaho Technology Council, correct?
That's correct.
And as chairman and as a council, you guys represent members and other people who are employers and people who need an educated, tech-savvy, tech-proficient populace within the state of Idaho. Is that roughly accurate?
Yep, I think that's directionally correct.
Awesome. Now, you and I get together here because you have also started working, or at least helping and advising, with the State Department of Education on their digital literacy program, which the Superintendent Critchfield has said, look, we need to have digital literacy. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we all agree. Like our children, when they're 18 and they graduate from high school or, whatever, they take their GED, when they move into the workforce, there will have to be a base level of technological capacity for them to have any manner of employability, right? Like maybe at the most basic of basic, you wouldn't have, you wouldn't have to use a word processor or have an email or something, but we could estimate, hey, look, anybody investing in their children, you're going to have this level of capacity. The big question is, what are those skills, right? Why are they necessary? And when do we need to actually teach them? Now, we all know that you could have electives chalked on there, like AutoCAD. When I was in high school, yeah. I knew how to code in like 2 different languages, and I had a version of 3D Studio, which was lit back in like 1998. Having 3D Studio, I could make like all kinds of cool 3D designs on my 486, right? So you have a lot of those types of things, but those are all electives. Right. The digital literacy is not focused on, teaching every single student how to code effectively or teaching every single student how to do like video editing, like I enjoy doing. It's focused on essentially base level requirements for employment. Talk to me about what you're doing.
Yeah, I think what you just said there is really important. This idea of digital literacy, it's not then that we expect every student to be a coder or a programmer. That's just not the case. And I think I might even take a step back in time. You said 486, so you kind of dated yourself. I don't know your exact age, but it's close to mine. When I was in high school, it was drilled into me 2 things. If I wanted to have any kind of professional success, I had to go to college. And my academic success depended on being able to memorize large amounts of data. And then when given a quiz, test, exam, being able to recall that data on the paper without referencing anything. Closed book, closed note. We live in a very different world today. I have children who have gone through the school system. I have 3 that are in college, 1 that the college path is not for him. College is a wonderful track, but it's not the only path. There's trade routes. In the case of my son, he went to a coding boot camp. I went right from there into the workforce. And so that's changed. And we also live in a world where it's not about how much information you can memorize, but it's how effectively can you process and assimilate new information coming at you, and how quickly can you relearn and be taught things. Adam Grant, one of my favorite authors, says that the future is going to belong to those who can connect dots, not those who accumulate facts. So when I think about digital literacy, it's preparing students to be successful in that kind of a world. I tell my wife, if I were in charge for a day from K to 12, I would make every test, every exam, every quiz, open note, open book, open internet, because that's the world we live in. It's not about, do I have the information right there that I can just regurgitate, but it's about, can I think critically? Can I access the resources around me to gather information to help me with the answer I'm seeking? At work, I would never give someone an assignment and say, okay, here's your work. You can't reference anything. You can't look anything up. You can't talk to anybody. You've got to sit right here and you have this much time to do it. That's just not a world that we live in. And so digital literacy is about helping to prepare our students for that world. And I think about it in 3 buckets. And we can talk about maybe some of the other questions that you kind of had added there at the intro. But the buckets for me are, there's a difference between digital dexterity or being tech savvy and being digitally literate. So how do we ensure that we're preparing our tech savvy kids to then be ready for the workforce? The second bucket is cybersecurity. And we really need to arm and prepare and train this generation of students to be cybersecurity experts in terms of safeguarding their own identities, in terms of safeguarding the identities they're going to be given by an employer. Because the reality is, this day and age, The cyber criminals, the hackers, they're not breaking into computers with some complex code. They're logging in. They're social engineering, they're phishing, they're getting your credentials and then logging into the system. And then the third area is, how do we prepare these students for a workforce that's going to be constantly evolving and changing and is going to require them to be willing and able to relearn and retrain and reskill as necessary? Because the reality is the jobs that are going to be here in 10, 20 years from now probably don't even exist today. So we need a resilient, flexible, dynamic, curious, able to always learn mindset. And digital literacy really prepares students for that kind of way of thinking.
Okay, man. But like, how? Because what you described is the holy grail of person. Like somebody who's like flexible, dynamic, like ready for a job that doesn't exist. All of these things, like, yeah. Like I remember, dude, my father-in-law sent me this video like 20 years ago. That was this video done to like some Moby song, and it was like all techie, and it was like really catchy music, and it's like, our students today are learning for things that don't even exist. And it was like, yeah, man, I'm aware. Like I understand. I'm doing things that didn't exist when I wasn't like, okay, I get it. Yeah. We've always had that, right? How do we actually engage people to be that curious, critical thinking style thing? Because critical thinking was a really big problem that was the education system nationally tried to tackle that, I think in the late 70s, early 80s. They're like, we need to do like critical thinking. Yeah. And it was exceedingly difficult what they realized is it was exceedingly difficult to teach critical thinking. Essentially what they had to do to get any manner of critical thinking done is they had to get people to argue very effectively, because essentially you present this problem of dialogue and this problem of logic, right? Like, okay, this is a problem. You want A, this guy wants B. You guys, or you disagree on something, you have to argue through it. And what people would end up doing is then they'd be like, well, you're an idiot. It's like, oh, no, you can't break that rule.
Game, right?
Like, and they would have to beat each other up verbally without doing ad hominem attacks or non sequiturs or whatever it might be, whatever rhetorical skills you might bring to bear. And that would force them to find different avenues of thought and paths of logic. And that ultimately, I think that's maybe similar to what is going on with our digital literacy task, which is like, okay, we have to present these problems and then dump a bucket. Did you ever see Apollo 13? Tom Hanks, go Tom Hanks, right?
Yeah, you've got to bring them home. Here's your stuff on the table.
That's right. You've got. We have to make this square thing fit into this circle thing using nothing but this. It's like, get to work, right? And they got the duct tape, and then they like tear one of the Ziploc bags, the whole thing. And I was like on the edge of my seat watching Tom. I was like, bring Tom Hanks home.
You knew what was going to happen.
Dude,
you were still excited.
Listen, everybody went to Titanic and made like $1 billion. We knew the end of that movie 1,000 times over, and I still went and cried when Jack died. Anyway, so.
And he didn't have to.
Anyway. He didn't have to. Like, damn, well, the door wouldn't float both of them. Anyway, the point is, I haven't seen that since I was 15. I still remember him like the door and what's her name? What was it? Kate Winslet? Kate Winslet, yeah. It's like, I'm flying Jack. Anyway, the point is, essentially, I view the problem at hand of like, we have these individual tools and we start dumping problems onto the table saying like, you have to solve this problem. And I'm not going to tell you how, with this myriad of tools. First, it's like, this is a very basic problem with one tool, and you understand how this tool works. And then this is another basic problem with another simple tool. And then like dynamic problems that require multiple tools. And then finally, it's like, I don't care how you skin the cat, skin this cat.
Mm-hmm. So your pushback is fair. And I don't mean to paint this Pollyannish picture of like, it's all going to be great. We just do this, everything works out. But I think here's a current world example that we're living through, and why I think this digital literacy experience for our students can help with it. The digital literacy training they would get through their curriculum would instill in them a sense of confidence of, okay, new tech, new software, new whatever, like I don't have to be scared of it. I can learn. I can teach myself. I can go online and learn. I can reach out to a friend. We're living in this era of rapid AI evolution. And there is a school of thought of, oh, my job is in jeopardy. AI is going to replace my job. And people have that mindset because I think in their mind, there's no way for them to compete or to keep up. Starting back when they're younger and just arming students with the ability to know that they can learn new things, that they can assimilate new information, new styles of working. Fast forward now, that'd be a really helpful mindset, experience base for current workforce to draw on. Because the reality is, AI is not coming for your job. The competition is going to be a colleague who's more efficient and proficient at using AI. And so trace that back to these high school students now. If we can teach them how to be more proficient and efficient and effective with using digital technology safely, ethically, very, very efficiently, they're going to be much better prepared for the world and the workforce they're about to enter into.
Okay. You may have actually, unintentionally perhaps, answered one of like my greatest questions,
All right.
which is, again, coming back to relevance.
Yeah.
Right. But what you're saying is, look, if we can teach people to learn, independently learn different platforms and different tech and different programs quickly, and have the confidence that they can do that instead of being stuck in like, this is my program and this is how I've always done it. You remember when like, it wasn't Windows 95. Which one came out that eliminated the like start button? That was like Windows 8 or something. It was like a 2008 version. But there was one.
I don't know, but yeah, it was a big change.
It was a big change. They eliminated that, and people freaked out, right? Like,
how do I start?
Yeah, exactly. And I was actually able to get an old version of a Windows, so like I never had to deal with losing the start button. Mm-hmm. But is that kind of problem where you're like, okay, we need to eliminate people being married to a specific paradigm of solution with this program. If we, like, as you were talking, I was envisioning like streaming services. Okay, I didn't know anything about Zoom until Saturday night before I had to start logging in with my SAT students on Sunday morning. And like, I was able to figure that out. Now you have Google Teams, you have SteamYard, you have Riverside, you have any number of streaming platforms. And I have to interact with these things from time to time for a multitude of different reasons. And I now no longer have anxiety.
Right.
Just as an adult, teaching myself, it's like, look, whatever the next one is, like, I'm going to be able to figure
out
out how to share data.
Expert, but you've got basic proficiency where you can navigate through it.
Right. And I have the confidence that I can learn different platforms. Yes. Right. Now, I'm a perpetual learner. I'm a big fan of that. But what you're talking about is like, got it. If you can teach people to learn, right? Like you have a culmination of a semester's worth of digital literacy on whatever, let's say on streaming platforms. And the final is like, hey, here's a new platform none of you have seen. Yeah. At least you've never seen it in this class. You're going to have to be able to do a call, make a breakout room, and do all these things in 90 minutes from now. Go. And everybody has to scramble to learn those things. And that would be so wild. Mm-hmm. You'd have people coming out of there that's like, look, whatever they throw me, I'm going to be able to figure it out. Yeah. Like, that's the holy grail. Like you could actually do that.
That's it. How do you remove like the paralysis by analysis, the fear, the dread of like, oh no, I've never seen this before. I don't know what to do. But just instill people with confidence that, okay, you haven't seen it before, but you've got the basic building blocks. You know the basic functions that are there, and you can kind of navigate to figure out where they would be on that application interface, and you're going to be just fine.
This is okay. I did not know. Obviously, I didn't know what you were going to say coming in here, but I've always viewed kind of what you're saying, which is, look, it's a failed model to train somebody on one program. Yeah. That's not the way the world is working anymore. What you need to do is train somebody to learn and navigate and transport through a myriad of programs. That's digital literacy. It's not like I'm really quick with Snapchat. It's like, no. I can figure out any of these programs. I can figure out any of these mechanisms. I know the functions that I need to find within this program that are relevant, and I can root those out somehow. Yeah. That's great.
And these students, it's not a steep learning curve either. Like it's not quite flat, but it's not a very steep incline because what you just described, they have that dexterity with just the way they live their lives today with communication and the tools they use. It's then translating that to, okay, now in a work environment, the tools you would need to operate professionally, to communicate, to present, to collaborate, they're going to be different tools in different companies you work for. And that's not a barrier for you. That's actually going to be a career advantage for you because you now have the confidence and the competence to navigate that landscape of whoever the software vendor platform creator is because you have those basic concepts.
Okay. I love what you're talking about. And I say that genuinely very rarely, but I genuinely love what you're talking about. How do we quantify this though? how do we say, because generally the academic paradigm is I have achieved a certain skill set with a thing, be that math, science, chemistry, English, whatever it is. I've achieved a certain skill set and here's my rating, right? That's our grade. It's like I can be this proficient in math. But what you're talking about is a knack. It's not a techne, right? Like you're talking about a knack of being able to just flow through and learn and adapt. How do we grade that or quantify that in some way so we have a qualitative value that we can then say you have achieved digital literacy?
I think you gave a good example, the streaming one, like it was done in fun.
I just made that up.
It was a good one.
Oh, thank you.
I think we just have to have ways where we teach the student the skill, and then we give them a way to demonstrate their proficiency. And back to one of my initial comments, I think in this particular realm, we allow them to do that, open book, open note, like they're able to glean the insight they need from whatever resource they have access to. Not expect them to just remember what they heard in the lecture or the thing they did in the class 2 weeks ago, but let them operate like they're going to in the real world and see if they can then, back to your Apollo 13 example, can they find the right pieces on the table and make the right widget to meet that objective?
So what we need to essentially do is make a bunch of like digital engineers, right? Like people that can take a lot of different things. Like the real skill set is to dump you into an ocean of information and tools and tech and have you build a little stuff. Like here's a great example. Okay. I had to make a proposal like 2 months ago. Okay. And I use ChatGPT very, very infrequently. Okay. Just because I don't need to with this. Like sometimes I help it with, it doesn't matter. But I had to make this proposal. Now, mind you, I don't write proposals frequently because that's not my job. Like my job is to have conversations and not sound like an absolute idiot all the time, which I ride that line of idiocy. But I had to make this proposal. And as such, I was like, I can stumble through this. Or if I know the right question, I know I can get a mostly right answer. And so I went to ChatGPT and I was like, okay, I need a proposal for this. Now, the key that I knew, if I was going to do this right, I was like, the key is not, I have to ask the right question and I have to give it just the right information and then it'll tease out the problem. So the actual prompt that I gave it was very extensive and very long. And I had to articulate very clearly who the reader of the proposal would be, what their pain points would be, what I would be offering, why it would be valuable, how it would all come together. And so it took me, 5 or 10 minutes to thoughtfully write out this prompt. And then it provided me with like a 4-page proposal that was like 95% of the way there. Yeah. And that was this killer moment where it's like, okay, I just upregulated all of my skill sets 100% first try, right, with this AI. But it was understanding going into it that it's like, the key is giving it the right input and the right question. That's going to yield the right results. So to your point, it's almost as if we are creating, or we're seeking to create, a population of people that know the right questions to ask or know how to use the tools in just the right way and engineer the digital world in just the right way to produce said outcome.
100%. And that what you're describing, that example, like prompt engineering, that might be a great capability to teach students digital literacy.
That's genius.
Because it's not mine, but it is smart. But just, generative AI, great tool. But if you then know how to like properly kind of craft your prompt to get to the specific response outcome that you're looking for, that is so helpful. It can save you so much time, because if not, you're going to get back maybe not quite what you wanted, and then you might just use that and it's just half as good as it could be. But that's a skill that you can learn, is how to interact with that AI interface. And so it all goes back to just making sure the students are equipped with the confidence to know that the skills they already kind of possess, being these digital natives growing up in this world, those can translate then to career-ready, life-important skills where they don't have to be fearful of their job loss or not being able to get a job because they don't have the right digital skills. No matter what field you might go into, this is a critically important competency that every high school student needs to graduate with.
Man, I love this prompt engineering. That is just blew my mind a little bit.
There's roles out there now, like that's the actual title of some of the job postings out there.
Wow.
Looking for prompt engineers to really help mine and glean as much value as possible from these generative AI tools that are out there.
That's wild. That's wild. understood on this piece of it, okay, is there a portion of digital literacy that you think would be valuable to help people understand the world as they're consuming it? And what I mean by that is okay. You follow anything about cloud seeding?
A little bit. Actually, I have a neighbor. He used to have a neighbor who worked for Idaho Power.
There we go.
And that's what he did.
There we go. Okay.
And I thought it was made up.
Yeah. Everybody, it's not made up, not made up. And I've done lots of interviews with Idaho Power, the Department of Water Resource, the Idaho Water Board, like all of these different, I'm trying to get into one of the planes. I have not been able to gain access to one, but I'm like, I want to go up in a storm and like when they light the flares off. Yeah. Okay. So we've gone through this information, rapids kind of as you were with cloud seeding. Everybody used to think it didn't exist. Now, mind you, cloud seeding has been in existence since the 30s and 40s. This is not a new thing at all. And it's been happening in Idaho since the 50s. Okay. And they've done a dump truck of science. Idaho actually paved the way in a lot of research in the teens. And I think 2017 was the first time they were able to conclusively prove the efficacy. They had Doppler radar and they had this plane going through a storm doing zigzag and X's and things like that. And they were watching in real time as the plane went through and turned on the flares, and this mass pattern came out where the precipitation that was water originally turned to ice because the Doppler was picking up ice crystals, and then it started snowing. They're like, it works. Like, it's super cool. So Idaho's done a bunch of cool things. Yeah. Now, we went through this crazy tumultuous experience where we generally, as the populace, thought like cloud seeding didn't really exist, right? And then kind of through, the early wave of social media, people started putting up pictures of, contrails in the air, like this isn't normal, right? And what's funny is like contrails have always existed. Like why it did not become normal all of a sudden, I don't know, but this became a real anxiety. And what has happened since 2004, when Facebook really came online, to now is you've had this mass wave of circulating explanations of problems people didn't even know exist. Like you're sick because of cloud seeding for these reasons. So you're sick. It's like, I am? It's like, oh yeah. Oh, you're really sick. Like you're not going to live to be 70. It's like, oh my God, I didn't even know I was sick. So like a problem you didn't even know you had and an explanation, and you're sick because of cloud seeding. I'm sick. But wait, why is it cloud seeding? Because of these reasons, right? Now, mind you, this is all happening in the ecosystem of social media where we all gain our worldviews. Same things with, Black Lives Matter, or excuse me, not Black Lives Matter, but defund the police was actually one of the first large-scale national social media campaigns that delivered real-life consequences for local municipalities that had nothing to do with the social media movement. It was wild, right? Anyway, so you have these large-scale things that exist in the ecosystem of social media where we form our worldviews, but they're so easy to manipulate. Because the Department of Water Resource is not hanging out on social media explaining to people what they're doing with silver iodide. They're not hanging out on Facebook or on Twitter being like, hey, this is one of our pilots, or like, hey, this is, Kayla Golden. She works for the Department of Water Resource. Like she's here to explain to you what the programs are. It's so easy to manipulate the world where people form their worldviews on social media. And I worry that in the absence of somebody helping young people understand how easy it is to engineer that stuff, right? Like don't trust things you see on the internet. All I do all day is make social media clips. Like listen, I put 6 layers of media in one 30-second clip. And that includes music to prescribe your emotional state. That includes captions to grab your eye attention. I have the coloring done just right. If I want it to be creepy, I put like weird background music in and I make you grayscale. And I can even put a grainy filter on to make it seem old. And I'll put a layer of like static so it seems like the film's really bad. Like I can do all of these different things to change the way you absorb this piece of content. And it's all fake. Like it's all junk. Is there a world, I'm sorry for the really long lead up, but is there a piece of digital literacy that helps people understand the world that they're consuming on social media better?
Yeah, but you're just, as an aside, your comment reminded me of Meme I saw where it said, when I was younger, I was told don't talk to strangers on the internet, never get in the car with a stranger. And I literally just used my phone to summon a stranger with a car that I got into. So it just, the world changes. At the macro level, the answer is yes. And I kind of bucket this under cybersecurity, which is kind of the second pillar of the three that I think about. And the cybersecurity point, and we can talk about this for a bit, part of it is their digital identity, to understand how to protect it, why it's important. Part of it is to be able to weed out the fact versus fiction And in our day and age, what's going to become increasingly important is, wait, is that a human or is that a chat bot that's talking to me? And you talk about the misinformation on the internet. A lot of that now is being like hyper fed and sped by not even humans, but by chat bots that are trained on algorithms. So we can teach students critical thinking for how they can assess this, how they can know what is based in science and truth and what might just be based in a bot that's trying to generate clicks or that's trying to give you salacious, unfounded information that sounds compelling, but if you give a little critical thinking and kind of dig into it, you realize, oh, that's not right.
Right. So, and again, coming back to it, you guys view that the kind of susceptibility of the broader populace as a cybersecurity issue.
Yeah. And you think about cybersecurity and how important that is for our society today. It's important personally in the form of you don't want to have your identity stolen. And if anyone's ever had that, it can be a really stressful, challenging, just difficult process. You don't want that to happen locally. You don't want a school attacked and the school shut down because the computers don't work. You don't want it to happen with local businesses, state level, certainly nationally. But the reality is that if you have a device that connects to the internet, you are prone to get attacked. And the number one way that cyber criminals work today is through social engineering. Phishing emails are kind of historically the common prevalent way. Vishing, which is like a voice call where they try and trick you over voice. Texting.
That reminds me, I got to call the IRS. They called me.
Yeah, you better call back. In fact, if you
the
just give me your
sheriff is
credit card
showing
number,
up.
I'll take care of it.
The sheriff is showing up. Oh my God.
But you probably get texts occasionally as well. They're like, hey, your payment's late. And you've kind of learned to like, okay, I know that's not right. And I can hover over the link and see it's taking me to this weird URL. Students sometimes don't have that understanding of that training. I've had that conversation with my kids. They'll show me a text and be like, Dad, my daughter just got a credit card. And then she gets a spam text saying like, hey, your account is overdue. She's like, Dad, is this my credit card? And so I took a minute and showed her like, no, it's not. Like, here's how you can tell this is someone trying to dupe you into giving up your credentials so they can scam you and take your money. So that's an incredibly important part for personal safety, but also local and national safety as well. Critical infrastructure, whether it's power or healthcare, whatever it might be, an employee at that company, they are the weakest link. So no matter how much an Idaho Power might invest in their cybersecurity to protect their systems, one single employee who doesn't have cybersecurity proficiency could respond to an email, give up their credentials, and let that attacker into the network. And so this is it's important for the student, but it's also very important from a national security standpoint as well. So we owe it to these kids to make them resilient, educated, and cyber attack resistant.
Man, that's a lot. Yeah. Again, the literacy is, again, way more than what I would have anticipated you guys are going after, which is beautiful. You mentioned 3 pillars, though.
Yeah.
What's the third?
The last one for me is just they're going to come into this workforce. And it's, you read these studies. If you're born and your year birth date starts with a 2, you likely want to have experiences throughout your career. So you're likely going to move within your company from job to job, or maybe even like across companies, where my generation is certainly older. It was more the mindset of like, I'm going to go to work for a company and put in my 35, 40 years, get my gold watch, and life is good. So they're already naturally kind of conditioned to moving around a bit. And that moving around is going to require them to be very agile and resilient and not just able to learn, but hungry to learn. They have to be more curious than they are certain. They're going to have to be able to recognize that what they knew 10 years ago with how they would do something and why it mattered might be a little bit different in today's world. And they have to have the ability to dynamically flex and contract with that kind of change. And that is just the reality of our modern digital world, is things are going to change at a pace that we've never seen before. And that's going to require a workforce that is more resilient and more able to relearn, retool, reskill at a cadence that we have never experienced before.
In the absence of that flexibility, we get Lonesome Dove, right? Like, are you familiar with that book?
I've seen the movie, but I'm not connecting the dots, so help me out here.
it was tremendous. I have actually never seen the movie.
Okay.
I only read the book. I very much enjoyed it. But you had people that were engaged in being Texas Rangers, right? They were essentially charged with domesticating Texas to some degree, and they were these cattle ranchers. And the whole problem that they ran into is that they had these incredible skill sets that were hyper relevant and hyper needed in an undomesticated Texas that lost relevancy and application in a largely safe Texas.
Yeah.
You no longer had the Comanche coming from all angles and all these things. And so you have these characters struggling for relevance and trying to move into different industries, obviously going from, law enforcement to cattle ranching. And even that, they weren't very successful, right? Like they had very limited buyers. They weren't producing great stock. They weren't doing all these things. And they had to, then they get this idea to do this like cross country, cattle drive. And that's when you actually see some of the relevance of who they were and their skill sets emerge, because they, like, these horrible situations befall them. And they like come out of, dormancy, their skills.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, these people were built for this one thing, right? And they were otherwise incapable of transitioning their value sets to something else in a meaningful manner.
Yeah.
And you see these two men kind of like come to, one obviously to the end of his life, and other people die, but one of the two main characters does die. And then the other one kind of just, gets injured and meanders kind of off into the sunset. And the whole book, you're just watching this failure to adapt play out in this very real time with these two characters in these painful ways. And now and then you see where it's like they become these heroic characters again when they like save people. And you're like, but there's no world for you to save people in anymore.
Yeah.
Like, people aren't getting hurt like this on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And that's a great concern of mine, right? In my own personal life, like having relevance and value to the world. But it's also, I think, something that we should, in a broader cultural sentiment, be worried about for our children. It's like, if you want your kid to have relevance when they're 20 and when they're 30 and when they're 40, you better have the most flexible, easily adaptable, wide skill set and broad kind of target person possible, because they're going to need to have that in order to span the flexibility of the age. Very similar actually to Interview with a Vampire. That was kind of the nature of that book, that the inflexibility of the human mind couldn't last the immortality of like the vampire life, right? Like they couldn't keep learning new things. I don't know, like these are classic books, but it seems like it's kind of coming to a head at this point in our age with like, look, we need people that aren't good at this one thing.
Yeah.
They need to be good at all things. How do we make that person?
Yeah, I think that analogy that you just shared is spot on. It's about relevance. It's about having this rising generation embrace, in this knowledge economy, embrace learning as not something I just did when I was at school, but as a critical life and business skill that they need to really enjoy, and to just embrace that idea of being more curious and certain, being willing to try new things, be willing to invest in yourself in the form of continuing education, self-learning, mentoring. An example I'll use from healthcare, you think about 40 years ago, and a physician who, over the course of his studies and his practice or her practice, had accumulated vast amounts of medical knowledge and could recall that at a moment's notice, they were considered a highly respected and effective physician, because as they had their visit with you, they could draw that knowledge to diagnose and figure out how to treat you. That is not what we need from physicians today, because they have more tools at their disposal. We need physicians who are agile and can adapt to new technology that's coming into the scene, that have the ability to mine the electronic health record that has all the patient history to kind of glean out the things they need to know, who can do the real-time kind of assessment based on what's being presented, who is looking at using AI to kind of augment, not replace, but augment their cognitive capacity to give that patient the best diagnosis and the best treatment. Now, today, in this day and age, that's the doctor I want. I don't want Marcus Welby. Like, I know he's brilliant, but I need the doctor who's reskilled, retooled, retrained to be the best physician based on our current modern age.
I have such an appreciation for that. That's beautiful. I don't go to the doctors much, but I can tell you one of the last times I did, I had this thing on my finger. It was like, you know, when you pick your finger back too far and like it really hurt, and then it like swells up.
Yeah.
And so one night, like I hit it on the table. I was like, oh God, like that really hurts.
Gotta amputate it.
Yeah, right. So I go into the doctor. I'm like, dude, my finger really hurts. And he's like, this is an old Russian guy, and he's like, okay, let's do some blood work. And I was like, okay, great. And he's like, are you on any medications? I said, no, doctor, I'm not. He's like, we can fix that. It's like putting in all this information. He's like, what's your cholesterol? I was like, I don't. Yeah. Doctor, I don't know. Right. Like, I don't actually know. He's like, we'll add this to the blood. So he gets the blood test back. Now, mind you, at the time, I'm like 181 pounds. I'm 6'2". I can run a marathon on spot. It's like, I'll run it barefoot. Doesn't even matter to me. And in great health, and he gets my cholesterol back, and he's like, well, your cholesterol's 230, but with proper diet and exercise, we can drop that. I was like, okay, listen, I don't know if we just met or something. Like, are you not? Because it would crap. I'm like, this is not making sense. Because he literally sent me a follow-up email with like, these are your lab results. And then it was just a copy and paste thing. And I never went in to see him again because I'm like, you're obviously not operating in the same world that I'm operating in, right? Like, now, mind you, I'm not a physician, I'm not a healthcare practitioner, but I do know, like, I eat an exceedingly clean diet. I don't drink, I don't smoke. My BMI is like, I have a resting heart rate of like 50. Like, what do you want me to do? And you read one number, and there's zero flexibility within the system. So to your point, it's like, I want somebody who's adapting, looking at a broader picture, using tools necessary to give me something of value, because just the stock copy and paste, it doesn't jive with me as a medical consumer. Where I'm like, that's not the doctor I want to see anymore.
Yeah, assimilate the new medical knowledge and the treatments. And like, we're interconnected, so we can learn what's working in other areas and bring it here. Like, that's what we need.
Yeah.
Same concept for these incredible young kids that are the hope and future of this world.
God, they're our only hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh my gosh. Listen to me, Reid. I really appreciate you. I know there's a working day for you. I feel like we got way more things to talk about, but I want to be sensitive to your time. Is there anything that you'd like to hit here at the end of this conversation?
Just thank you to the incredible educators across our state. I spent 11 years on the Valley View School Board, and so just gleaned such a great appreciation for just how hard the administrators of faculty work each day to protect, to educate, to nurture these students. What I've experienced, and you and I were talking before, and you shared something that I think we're like-minded, the key to great educational outcomes for our students, it's parental involvement. Period.
Well, God bless that. Thank you for what you're doing for Idaho. Thanks for coming in today. Let's do it again.
Sounds good.